In the final hours of the year 2000, a quiet Tokyo suburb became the setting for one of Japan's most disturbing and baffling crimes. The Miyazawa family, Mikio, Yasuko, and their 2 young children, were brutally murdered in their own home. The killer didn't just take their lives, he left behind a horrific scene. Despite an exhaustive investigation, advanced forensic analysis, and a mountain of evidence, the identity of the intruder remains unknown. Today we revisit the Miyazawa murders, a case that has haunted Japan for more than 2 decades. This is the story of a crime so violent and so perplexing that it continues to defy explanation. Welcome back to Fireside Unsolved, episode 157, The Unsolved Murder of the Miyazawa Family. Haruko, the mother of 41-year-old Yasuko Miyazawa, arrived at her daughter's home in Setagaya, a quiet suburb on the western edge of Tokyo, at 10:40 a.m. on December 31st, 2000. Haruko had grown worried after being unable to contact her daughter and decided to visit the house. When she rang the doorbell and heard nothing, she stepped inside, only to come face to face with a nightmare. Inside the home, Haruko found her daughter, son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren, all brutally murdered. Yasuko, along with her husband, 44-year-old Mikio Miyazawa, and their 8-year-old daughter Nina, were all found dead, stabbed multiple times, while their other child, Rei, had been strangled. The attack was savage, and the crime scene was chilling. Investigators believe the killer may have entered the home through the second-floor bathroom window at the rear of the house, which faced Soshigaya Park. Supporting this theory, police uncovered footprints in the mud nearby, leading from the park's direction toward the residence. These prints indicated that the intruder may have scaled the park's fence before making their way to the house. Investigators suspect that the killer then used an outdoor air conditioning unit as a foothold in order to reach the second-floor window. Once there, they likely cut away the screen and carefully crawled inside, avoiding detection. The nightmare inside the Miyazawa home began with its youngest victim. 6-year-old Rei, asleep in his second-floor bedroom, was the first to be attacked. The killer used his bare hands to strangle the child. What happened next remains uncertain, but evidence suggests that after the child was killed, Mikio Miyazawa, the 44-year-old father, may have heard something, perhaps a faint noise or an unfamiliar presence in his home, and after going upstairs, he came face to face with the intruder. There was a violent struggle. Mikio fought back, managing to injure the attacker before he was ultimately overpowered. In a brutal assault, the killer drove a knife into his skull. The force of the attack was so extreme that the blade snapped, leaving a fragment embedded in his head, a detail later confirmed in police reports. With Mikio dead, the killer turned his attention to Yasuko and 8-year-old Nina, stabbing them repeatedly with the broken knife. When the blade became unusable, the intruder retrieved another knife from the family's own kitchen and continued the attack. The attack was vicious. Nina's injuries suggested that the killer had also beaten her severely. What happened next has been described by some as just as disturbing as the murders themselves. Instead of immediately leaving, trying to distance himself from the family he just killed in cold blood, the killer remained in the house. Authorities can really only guess, but for anywhere from an estimated 2 to 10 hours, he moved through the Miyazawa's home as if it were his own. He helped himself to their food, including 4 bottles of barley tea, a melon, and several ice creams, and even tended to his wounds using their first aid kit. Some reports suggest that he may have even taken a nap on the living room sofa, though this detail remains uncertain. During his time inside, the murderer ransacked drawers, scattered documents that he found, some of which were dumped in the bathtub and toilet, and stole a small amount of money, leaving behind a much larger sum. He also used the bathroom and left his feces in the toilet without flushing. Before leaving the home, he abandoned several of his personal belongings in the living room. A knife, a scarf, a hip bag, a shirt, a jacket, a hat, gloves, and 2 handkerchiefs. An analysis of Mikio Miyazawa's computer revealed that the device had connected to the internet in the early hours of December 31st, between 1:18 a.m. and 1:23 a.m. This was proof that the killer had used the family computer after the murders had already taken place. There were also conflicting reports regarding whether the killer had cut the family's phone lines before committing the murders. While early speculation suggested that the lines had been severed as a premeditated move, there is no evidence to support the claim. Despite the wealth of physical evidence left behind, police have never been able to identify or apprehend a suspect. However, forensic analysis has provided some incredibly specific details about the killer. By examining the feces left behind in the Miyazawa's toilet, investigators determined that the perpetrator had eaten string beans and sesame seeds the day before the murders. Further investigation traced the clothing and the knife left at the scene to purchases made in Kanagawa Prefecture, offering a potential lead. Law enforcement launched an extensive effort to gather evidence and identify the perpetrator. Named Operation Roller, the initiative called in officers to go door to door throughout the neighborhood, collecting fingerprints from local residents in hopes of finding a match. However, despite the massive scope of the operation, no leads emerged. Investigators focused on a key piece of evidence: the killer's clothing. Police determined that the shirt left behind at the crime scene was part of an extremely limited production run. Only 130 of the shirts had ever been made and sold. Yet despite exhaustive efforts, authorities were able to trace only 12 of the buyers, leaving the remaining owners, including the likely suspect, unidentified. Other forensic evidence offered puzzling clues. Inside the hip bag abandoned by the killer, police discovered traces of sand. Lab analysis revealed that the sand was linked to the Nevada desert, more specifically the area surrounding Edwards Air Force Base in California. Additional particles suggested a connection to a skate park in Japan. Meanwhile, the shoes worn by the suspect were identified as a South Korean manufactured model, distributed and marketed by British sportswear brand Slazenger. These details pointed to an individual with possible international ties. A strange and unexplained event occurred months after the crime. On April 9, 2001, exactly 100 days after the murders, a Jizo statue, a Buddhist figure often associated with the protection of children, was placed at the Sengawa River, just west of the Miyazawa residence. Some speculated that someone connected to the crime may have left it there as a symbolic gesture, but no one was ever linked to the mysterious statue, leaving its true significance unknown. Physically, the killer is believed to be around 170 centimeters tall, approximately 5 foot 7 inches tall, with a thin build. Based on the physicality required to enter the Miyazawa home and carry out the brutal attack, police estimate the suspect's age to be between 15 to 24 years old at the time of the crime. Additionally, the nature of the stab wounds suggested that the killer was right-handed. One of the most intriguing discoveries came from blood evidence at the scene. A sample of type A blood, belonging to neither Mikio, Yasuko, nor their children, was found, confirming that the killer had been injured during the attack. When investigators conducted DNA testing, the results revealed an unusual genetic profile. The suspect was determined to be male and possibly of mixed ancestry. His maternal DNA suggested a lineage from a European ancestor, potentially from a southern European country near the Mediterranean or Adriatic Sea. Further analysis revealed that the killer had a genetic marker commonly found in East Asian populations. This group appears in approximately 20 to 25% of Koreans, 10% of Chinese individuals, and around 8% of Japanese individuals. These findings led the police to expand the investigation beyond Japan, seeking assistance from Interpol under the belief that the perpetrator may not be Japanese or may no longer reside in the country. Yet despite these extensive efforts, the identity of the Miyazawa family's killer remains unknown. The investigation into the Miyazawa family murders remains one of the most extensive in Japanese history. Over the years, close to 250,000 investigators from around the world have worked the case, meticulously collecting and analyzing over 12,000 pieces of evidence. In their continued efforts to solve the crime, police have urged the public to revisit old videos and photographs from the year 2000. They requested people look for anyone who may have been wearing the same distinctive sweatshirt linked to the killer. The Tokyo Metropolitan Police remains determined to find answers, and there is a total bounty of 20 million yen for information leading to the arrest of the killer. They continue to call for any leads that may help bring justice to the Miyazawa family. Anyone with information is urged to contact the Seijo Police Station at 03-3482-0110. Today we'll look at 5 bizarre and mysterious stories that challenge the limits of what we think we know, and perhaps, just perhaps, hint at a reality far more complex than we can imagine. We'll visit Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and check out a strange series of protractors scattered across the city. Then we'll stop by Seattle, where a mysterious vending machine that seemed to stock itself for over 20 years disappeared. We'll investigate reports of a high school tragedy wiped from history, a town in Wisconsin that may have never existed, and finally a snowfall in Siberia unlike anything the world had seen before. These bizarre stories defy logic, challenge our understanding of reality, and force us to question everything we thought we knew about the world. Were these strange occurrences mere coincidences, elaborate hoaxes, or could they be evidence of something far stranger? Let's find out together. Welcome back to Fireside Unsolved, episode 158, 5 strange but true mysteries that will blow your mind. In 2011, something strange began appearing on and around the streets of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Small, colorful protractors, painted in shades of green, red, yellow, white, pink, and purple, started showing up in unexpected places. They were everywhere, glued to bridges, traffic lights, on the sides of trash cans, mailboxes, and even seemingly random stones. These protractors were hidden in plain sight, out in the open, yet easily overlooked. At first, they seemed to be completely random in their placement around the city, but a closer look revealed something peculiar. Each protractor was individually numbered, with the highest number found being 500. The largest concentration of these mysteriously placed protractors was found in the Polish Hill neighborhood of Pittsburgh, yet no area of the city was untouched. As word spread, speculation grew. Maybe they were some kind of art project, or possibly a puzzle. Some believed that if each protractor's location were mapped and the numbers connected in order, color-coded accordingly, it would reveal a hidden message or image. Others suggested they were a simple, clever tribute to Pittsburgh's steel industry and its famous bridges, symbols of the city's history. But perhaps the most compelling theory was something far simpler. They were each an invitation. A reason for people to step outside, explore their surroundings, and rediscover parts of their city they might otherwise ignore. Since their original discovery in 2011, the protractors have begun to disappear. Some may have been taken as souvenirs, others removed by city workers, and many were lost to weather and the elements. As their numbers have dwindled, the mystery has only deepened. Now, in 2025, a handful of these artifacts remain, scattered across the city like relics of an unsolved riddle. But despite years of curiosity and investigation, questions linger. Who placed them? Why were they placed? And most importantly, was there ever a greater purpose, or was the mystery itself the point? It's very possible that we'll never truly know the secret of Pittsburgh's protractors. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. For almost 30 years, an ordinary-looking vending machine stood on East John Street in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. At first glance, it seemed like any other, a weathered Coca-Cola-branded relic from the 1970s. But this machine was anything but ordinary. Instead of the standard selection of sodas, it dispensed rare, unusual, and long-discontinued drinks. And the strangest part, no one knew, or knows, who stocked it. For years, the Capitol Hill Mystery Soda machine baffled both locals and visitors. With each press of a mystery button, customers would receive an unpredictable selection, obscure brands, flavors long thought extinct, and drinks that seemed to appear from nowhere. It ran on electricity supplied by the nearby Broadway locksmith, but the store's employees insisted they had no idea who maintained the machine. Speculation has run wild. It could be the work of a devoted collector, an ex-employee of a soda company, a prankster. Some even have gone as far as saying it was supplied by some kind of underground soda syndicate. First appearing in the late 1990s, the vending machine started with only one mystery button. As its legend grew both locally and around the world via the internet, all 6 were eventually replaced with mystery options. Over the years, prices crept up, from 55 cents in the 90s to 75 cents in 2014, and finally to $1 in 2018, coinciding with Seattle's sugary drink tax. Then, on June 29, 2018, the Capitol Hill Mystery Soda machine vanished. It wasn't vandalized, stolen, or removed in a rush. It was taken with care, its electrical connections carefully severed. In its place, a simple note was left behind. Went for a walk. Not long after, a message appeared on the machine's Facebook page. Going for a walk, need to find myself. Maybe take a shower even. Who wrote it? No one knows. Now, years later, the machine remains missing. Despite rumors, sightings, and endless speculation, it has never returned. Is it still out there, waiting to reappear when the time is right? Only one thing is certain. The Capitol Hill Mystery Soda machine left more than just cold drinks in its wake. It left behind a legend. In the depths of the internet, a chilling rumor persists. A mass tragedy, erased from history. No news reports, no survivors. No records of the event ever taking place. It's known only as the 2006 volleyball incident. According to online claims that first surfaced in 2006, a mass casualty event took place during a high school volleyball game somewhere in the Midwest or Mountain West. Maybe Nebraska or possibly one of the Dakotas. The alleged death toll was between 17 and 24 people. And yet there is no proof. No official reports. No grieving families. No memories of the victims. If this event truly happened, every trace of it was erased, covered up so thoroughly that even those who should remember have forgotten. This unsettling claim has fueled rampant speculation. Maybe it was a case of mass memory suppression, similar to the Mandela effect, or something even more bizarre, an experiment in controlling perception and rewriting history. Despite years of online debate, no definitive evidence has surfaced. Was the 2006 volleyball incident real? A hoax? Or something else entirely? The truth remains buried, if it ever existed at all. There's a town that some claim once stood in the heart of Wisconsin, a town that existed, and then one day, it simply didn't. This town was named Doveland. Doveland, Wisconsin is supposedly a place that has vanished so completely, there is no official record that it was ever there. No maps, no documents, nothing. Yet whispers of its existence persist. People claim to remember it. Some even say they have proof. A souvenir mug. A t-shirt with the town's name printed across the front. But how can a place that multiple people say they remember just vanish off the face of the earth? Some say Doveland was erased due to a catastrophe, a natural disaster so devastating that the town had to be wiped from history. Others suggest a flood, perhaps caused by a dam failure, buried the town beneath the waters. But if that were true, surely there would be records of the event. Then there are the darker theories. Claims that the government was involved, that Doveland was the site of a military experiment gone horribly wrong. That what happened there was so terrible, the town had to be erased, not just from the map, but from memory itself. At the end of the day, there is no official proof that Doveland, Wisconsin was ever real. But the stories live on. And if there's one thing history has taught us, it's that sometimes the truth is far stranger than fiction. On the morning of January 31st, 2007, the people of Omsk Oblast, deep in the Siberian wilderness, awoke to a sight that defied explanation. What should have been a fresh white snowfall had turned an unsettling shade of orange. The phenomenon wasn't isolated. Over 1,500 square kilometers across Omsk, Tomsk, and Tyumen were blanketed in the bizarre, rust-colored snow. At first, locals were pretty confused by what they were seeing. But then, as they examined it more closely, confusion turned to concern. The snow wasn't just an unusual color. It had a foul odor and an oily, almost greasy texture. It stained clothing and left residue on the hands of those who touched it. And while most of it was orange, some patches appeared red or yellow. Authorities quickly launched an investigation, testing samples to determine if the snow posed a danger to the approximately 27,000 people living in the affected region. The results were strange. While the snow was deemed non-toxic, it contained 4 times the normal levels of iron, along with high concentrations of acids and nitrates. Residents were advised not to use it for drinking, cooking, or feeding their animals. With no immediate answers, speculation ran rampant. Some believed it was caused by industrial pollution, perhaps waste from nearby metallurgical plants. Russia's vast oil industry had deep roots in Omsk, leading some to suspect a major spill or chemical discharge. Others feared something far worse, thinking that this was the evidence of a nuclear accident, quietly being covered up. Or it could have been a failed rocket launch from Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, showering the region with contaminated debris. Yet, as more tests were conducted, a less sinister, but still remarkable theory emerged. Scientists began to suspect that the mysterious snowfall had been caused by a massive sandstorm in Kazakhstan, which had swept fine particles of sand and clay high into the upper atmosphere. As precipitation formed, these airborne minerals mixed with the falling snow, staining it orange before it reached the ground. But even this explanation left questions unanswered. While Siberia has experienced colored snowfall before, black from soot, green and blue from chemical contamination, even red in rare cases, never before had such a widespread, vibrant orange snowfall been recorded. If a sandstorm was truly to blame, a similar event would have been reported in neighboring regions, but there were none. To this day, the Siberian orange snow of 2007 remains a topic of debate. Was it a natural anomaly, an industrial accident, or something else entirely? Nearly 2 decades later, no definitive answer has been found. But for those who witnessed it firsthand, one thing is certain: it was a sight they would never forget. The observable universe refers to the spherical region of the universe that encompasses all matter, at least all matter which can be observed. This includes all of the light and all of the radiation from these objects, or at least the light and radiation that has had enough time to reach us since the Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. It's important to note that each location in the universe has its own observable universe. The observable universe centered on Earth may or may not overlap with the one centered on another point in space. This is because the observable universe is constrained by the speed of light. There are parts of the universe so far away that the light emitted since the Big Bang has not yet had time to reach us, and therefore, these areas fall outside of our observable universe. Based on current calculations, the radius of the observable universe is estimated to be about 46.6 billion light-years. This mind-boggling distance encompasses the farthest regions of the universe we can observe with current technology. The true size of the universe remains unknown, and it is entirely possible that it is infinite. The observable universe is hard to comprehend, containing an estimated 2 trillion galaxies. Within these galaxies, there are potentially as many stars as 10 to the 24th power, or over 1 septillion, a number almost impossible to wrap our heads around. This means there could be more stars, and quite possibly more Earth-like planets, than there are grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth combined. On September 14, 1994, UFO sightings began to be reported throughout southern Africa, with multiple accounts of a bright fireball streaking across the night sky. These sightings were frequent, and the public was encouraged to call into Zimbabwe radio to share their experiences. The sightings continued to captivate local communities, but one particular event, occurring 2 days later, would become one of the most widely discussed UFO encounters in history. On September 16, 1994, a UFO sighting took place outside Ruwa, Zimbabwe, a small agricultural center located 22 kilometers or 14 miles southeast of the capital, Harare. The event occurred at Ariel School, a private institution that served mainly affluent families from Harare. At 10 a.m. during the school's mid-morning break, a group of children were outside when they witnessed a mysterious event that would become known as the Ariel School UFO incident. According to multiple interviews conducted with the children who witnessed the event, a consistent narrative emerged. A total of 62 children, aged between 6 and 12, reported seeing one or more UFOs. These objects were described as silver discs that appeared in the sky before floating down to a field of brush and small trees just outside the school grounds. As the craft descended, between 1 and 4 humanoid figures, described as having large eyes and wearing black clothing, exited the UFO and approached the children. This was the moment when many of the children, frightened by what they saw, ran away. However, some of the older pupils stayed behind to watch as the beings came closer. It was at this point that the children claimed the creatures communicated with them telepathically, relaying a message about the environment and the need to take care of the Earth, before returning to their craft and flying away. The teachers were in a meeting inside the school at the time, unaware of what was happening outside. After the incident, they returned to class and attempted to tell their teachers what they had seen, but their accounts were dismissed. However, the children didn't keep the experience to themselves. When they returned home, they shared the story with their parents. Many of the parents, concerned by the consistency and intensity of their children's accounts, visited the school the following day to discuss what had happened with the faculty. News of the strange encounter quickly spread, and on September 19, 1994, the BBC's correspondent in Zimbabwe visited the school to conduct interviews with both the pupils and staff. During these interviews, the children were asked to draw pictures of what they had witnessed. Interestingly, many of the children's drawings depicted the same strange beings and craft, suggesting that they had all seen the same event. Despite their young age and the initial skepticism they faced, the children's testimony, combined with the physical evidence and media coverage, made this UFO sighting one of the most famous and well-documented encounters of its kind. The aerial school UFO incident quickly became one of the most well-known UFO sightings in Africa and is still regarded as one of the most significant events in UFO history. However, in 2023, a new claim was made in the Netflix documentary Encounters. A former student named Dallin came forward with a surprising revelation. He admitted that he had orchestrated the incident, claiming that he had purposefully told his classmates and other students that a shiny rock in the distance was a UFO. According to Dallin, he never expected the story to gain so much traction and was shocked by the mass hysteria that followed. Despite Dallin's claim, many of the witnesses maintained their belief that what they experienced was real. Drifting through the vastness of space, a mysterious and unexpected visitor captured the world's attention in 2017. Oumuamua. Unlike anything observed before, this celestial object became the first confirmed interstellar object to enter our solar system, marking a milestone in astronomical discovery. First detected on October 19, 2017, Oumuamua originated from beyond our solar system, making it an unprecedented find. Estimates suggest the object measures between 100 and 1,000 meters, or between 300 and 3,000 feet in length. Oumuamua's reddish hue aligns with other objects found in the outer reaches of the solar system. Despite its close pass by the sun, it displayed no signs of the typical comet behavior that forms when a comet nears the sun, vaporizing and emitting a cloud of gas and dust. Its rotation rate is similar to that of asteroids in the solar system, yet its extraordinarily elongated shape sets it apart, as only a few known natural bodies share the same form. By July 2019, the majority of astronomers had concluded that Oumuamua was a natural object, though the details of its composition and nature remain a subject of debate due to the limited time available for observation. Among the theories proposed for its origin are that it may be the remnant of a disintegrated rogue comet, or a fragment of an exoplanet composed of nitrogen ice, similar to Pluto. As the first confirmed interstellar object, Oumuamua presented a fascinating challenge to the International Astronomical Union, which created a new designation for such objects, I for interstellar object. As the inaugural object of its kind, it was designated 1I. The name Oumuamua is derived from the Hawaiian language, where U means reach out for and Mua means first or in advance of. Thus the name translates roughly to first distant messenger. This name reflects the idea of Oumuamua as a messenger from the distant past, reaching out to humanity. The SETI Institute's Allen Telescope Array was used to scan Oumuamua for any unusual radio emissions, but none were detected. Further, more detailed observations were made using the Breakthrough Listen Project's equipment and the Green Bank telescope, where the data was analyzed for narrowband signals. But again, nothing unusual was found. It remains unclear how long Oumuamua has been journeying through the stars. Because Oumuamua showed no signs of slowing down, its trajectory suggests that it won't be captured by the sun's gravity. Instead, it will continue its journey, eventually leaving the solar system and venturing back into interstellar space. Lunar swirls are strange features scattered across the moon's surface, notable for their striking ability to reflect an unusually large amount of light. These features often appear as winding patterns, with darker regions that form contrasts against the bright swirls, giving them a visually distinct and intricate appearance. One of the fascinating aspects of lunar swirls is their proximity to regions of the moon with relatively high magnetic fields. Each swirl corresponds to a magnetic anomaly, though not every magnetic anomaly is associated with a visible swirl. This unique correlation between reflective features and magnetic fields has led scientists to propose three leading theories about the formation of lunar swirls. The first model proposes that lunar swirls are the result of a comet impact. According to this theory, the impact of a comet would have deposited reflective materials on the moon's surface, creating the distinctive bright swirls that we observe today. This model suggests that the swirls formed from debris left behind by the collision, possibly mixed with other elements from the impact. The second model argues that the swirls are linked to magnetic anomalies on the moon's surface. This theory proposes that the presence of a magnetic field prevents certain materials from being displaced by solar winds, allowing more reflective particles to remain in these areas. The magnetic field essentially protects these regions, allowing them to maintain their brightness compared to the surrounding lunar surface. The third model hypothesizes that weak electric fields could be responsible for attracting or repelling fine dust particles that are electrically charged. These fine dust particles, which are highly reflective, may be concentrated by the electric fields, contributing to the formation of the lunar swirls. To further investigate these theories, NASA plans to send a rover with a multispectral microscope to the moon. The rover will analyze the coarseness and brightness of surface particles and transmit this data back to Earth, helping scientists gain a better understanding of the origins and composition of the lunar swirls. On October 27, 1954, 10,000 passionate fans packed into the Stadio Artemi Franchi in Tuscany, Italy. They were excited to watch a heated soccer match between Fiorentina and their local rivals Pistoiese. The energy was electric, the crowd roaring with every play, until suddenly, everything changed. Just after halftime, an eerie silence fell over the stadium. The game came to an abrupt halt. Players stopped mid-stride, their focus no longer on the ball, which rolled to a standstill on the field. The crowd, once deafening, was now frozen in place, all eyes locked on the sky above. Among the stunned spectators was Artico Magnini, a Fiorentina legend and former Italian World Cup player. Decades later, the memory remained vivid in his mind. "I remember everything, from A to Z. It was something that looked like an egg, moving slowly, very slowly. And as it passed over us, strange silver glitter rained down from the sky." The stadium was in a state of shock. No one had ever seen anything like it before. Players, fans, and officials stood in awe, as if the world itself had momentarily paused to witness something beyond comprehension. Among the thousands of stunned spectators was Gigi Boni, a devoted Fiorentina fan who had never forgotten that day. "I remember it clearly, this incredible sight. They moved so fast, then suddenly they stopped. It all lasted just a couple of minutes. They looked like Cuban cigars. That's the only way I can describe them." For years, Boni replayed the event in his mind, searching for answers. But to him, there was only one explanation. "I believe they were extraterrestrial. That's the only thing that makes sense." And it wasn't just the fans at Stadio Artemi Franchi who witnessed something strange that day. Whatever had appeared over Florence that afternoon wasn't an isolated incident. Reports flooded in from across Tuscany, accounts of mysterious objects in the sky, spotted in town after town. In Prato, north of Florence, multiple eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a bright white beam cutting through the sky, its origin unknown. One of the most bizarre elements of this UFO sighting wasn't just what people saw in the sky, but what they saw falling from it. Witnesses described a strange, glitter-like substance drifting down after the objects vanished. Some said it resembled cotton. Others compared it to delicate cobwebs. Attempts to collect the material were frustrating. On contact, it would disintegrate, vanishing before it could be properly examined. Still, some were determined to collect a sample. One of them was Giorgio Battini, a journalist for the Florentine newspaper La Nazione. Decades later, in a 2003 interview with the Italian television program Voyager, Battini recalled that his office was inundated with phone calls that day. From the newspaper's headquarters in the heart of Florence, his own view was obstructed by the towering cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. But curiosity got the better of him. Climbing to the rooftop, he finally saw what so many others had witnessed: brilliant, fast-moving orbs streaking toward the cathedral's dome. Battini set out into the countryside surrounding Florence to a wooded area outside the city, where he discovered something astonishing. The trees and ground were covered in the mysterious white material. Unlike others who had tried and failed to preserve the material, Battini carefully rolled samples onto a matchstick and rushed them to the Institute of Chemical Analysis at the University of Florence. When he arrived, he realized he wasn't alone. Others had also brought samples of their own, looking for answers. The laboratory analysis of the mysterious material was carried out by Professor Giovanni Caneri and his team at the University of Florence. Using spectrographic analysis, they determined that the substance contained boron, silicon, calcium, and magnesium. It was also confirmed to be non-radioactive. However, the material's origin remained unknown, and to the frustration of those seeking the truth, the samples were destroyed during testing, leaving no further opportunities for study. There are some, however, that believe there is a far simpler, earthly explanation, one that has been proposed for other cases of so-called angel hair sightings around the world. There is a phenomenon known as ballooning that occurs when spiders migrate. The spiders spin long, delicate silk threads to catch the wind, and using the silk as a natural sail allows them to travel great distances. These webs can link together, forming a large mass that drifts through the sky, carrying the spiders with it. Some of these have been recorded at altitudes of up to 14,000 feet. When sunlight reflects off the strands, it creates all sorts of visual effects, making the phenomenon appear almost magical. As pieces of the silk break off and fall to the ground, it can resemble the glitter-like material that witnesses saw drifting from the sky over Florence that day. Given that September and October are peak migration months for spiders in the Northern Hemisphere, many are convinced that this was the true explanation. But not everyone agrees. There are still those people that were there that day and maintain that what they saw was something far more extraordinary, something that defied logic and explanation. Whether an astonishing celestial event, an extraterrestrial encounter, or simply an unusual display of nature, the events of October 27, 1954, remain one of Italy's and the world's most intriguing and enduring UFO mysteries. In the first half of the 19th century, 1828 to be exact, a mysterious figure appeared in Europe. A young man whose very existence would become one of history's greatest mysteries. His name was Caspar Hauser, and his life was a puzzle that would turn out to be impossible to solve. On May 26, 1828, Caspar was found wandering the streets of Nuremberg, Germany. He was wearing ragged and torn clothes, could barely speak, and seemed to know little about the world around him. The only item he had with him was a strange note. The note claimed he had been raised in complete isolation and had never seen the outside world. But now, without any explanation, he had been released into society with one request. He wished to serve the king. Caspar's story quickly spread across Europe, drawing the attention of scholars, scientists, and the simply curious. People wondered who he was. Maybe he was a lost prince, or a victim of a cruel experiment, or something else entirely. What struck everyone most was Caspar's ability to learn. Despite his earlier isolation, he quickly adapted to the world around him. He learned to speak, read, and write in a remarkably short time. His curiosity about the world seemed infinite, and with every word he spoke, he shared bits of his mysterious past, of a life spent in the darkness of a small room with only a toy horse for companionship. However, despite his rapid progress in society, Caspar's life seemed to be filled with danger. In October 1829, Caspar was found with a head injury, claiming he had been hit in the head by a masked man. He survived several more attempts on his life, which only brought more questions about him to the forefront. Then, in December 1833, Caspar Hauser returned home one day with a serious stab wound. He said that he had been tricked, told to meet someone in a local garden that promised to tell him the truth about his life and his past. But instead of answers, he was met with a knife. Days later, Caspar would pass away from his injuries, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and theories that continue to captivate people, even today. The circumstances of his death were as mysterious as his life, leading to numerous theories about who might have killed him, or had him killed. Was he a noble child hidden away for political reasons, a victim of a cruel social experiment, or something else entirely? For nearly 2 centuries now, the world has been fascinated with the story of Caspar Hauser. No concrete evidence of who he really was has ever surfaced, leaving his identity a mystery. In the early 1700s, the waters surrounding the Caribbean were alive with tales of adventure, danger, and lawlessness. Among the most infamous figures of this golden age of piracy was a woman whose name is still mentioned centuries later, Anne Bonny. Born around 1697 in Ireland, Anne was the daughter of a servant woman and a wealthy lawyer. Her early life was marked by a move to the New World, where her family settled in the bustling port city of Charleston, South Carolina. It was in Charleston that Anne's rebellious nature began to take shape. Anne Bonny wasn't one to follow the rules. Even from an early age, Anne's fiery temperament and independent nature were evident. She defied societal norms, refusing to conform to the expectations placed upon women of her time. Obedience and servitude were not in her nature. She just wanted a life on her own terms. Anne's first step into the outlaw world came with her marriage to James Bonny, a small-time pirate with big ambitions. But then, she met the infamous pirate captain Calico Jack Rackham. He was charismatic, cunning, and had no fear of danger, everything that Anne had been looking for. They had an instant connection, and Anne left her husband to join Rackham's crew. There was only one problem: she was a female. To sail among pirates, Anne disguised herself as a man in order to prove herself. But she didn't care. Anne was finally loose of society's chains, and she embraced life as a pirate, and she was good at it. Men that underestimated her didn't make the same mistake twice. She was respected and feared, and had the courage of the most seasoned sailors, and she quickly became a legend among the other outlaws at sea. On the high seas, Anne found an equal in fellow female pirate Mary Read, who, like Anne, had traded a conventional life for the thrill of being an outlaw. Together, they were an unstoppable force, unlike any the Caribbean had seen before. They plundered and pillaged anyone that crossed their paths. They participated in raids, capturing ships and looting their treasures and goods. It seemed like their lives were a mix of constant chaos and danger, but they wouldn't have it any other way. But in 1720, her luck seemed to finally run out. While sailing with Calico Jack Rackham, his ship was captured, and so was everyone on board. Everyone was shackled and dragged to the courts of Jamaica to answer for their crimes. For Anne, Calico Jack Rackham, and his men, there was no escape. The sentence was swift and final, but for Anne, she had one last card to play. Before she was killed, she claimed that she was pregnant, and with that, her execution was postponed. From there, Anne Bonny seemingly vanished off the face of the earth. No records exist of what became of her after her trial ended. She could have died in prison, escaped and started a new life, returned to the seas. Her fate, like most of her life, remains a mystery. Anne Bonny's name lives on to this day, as a legend among legends during the golden age of piracy. Jerome's story begins on a foggy day in 1863, near the village of Sandy Cove, Nova Scotia. On this day, fishermen discovered a man on the beach. It looked like he had been abandoned there. He had both legs amputated above the knees, and he was unable to communicate. The only word he ever spoke was when they asked him his name, and he replied, Jerome. A local family, the Comos, would ultimately take him in, offering shelter and taking care of the man. Unfortunately, without a way to communicate, his past remained a mystery, and speculation ran wild. Some believed he was a sailor who had suffered a terrible accident, washing up on the beach. Others thought he might be a victim of foul play, or even a shipwreck survivor with some kind of brain injury. And even though his voice was never heard, he touched the people of Nova Scotia deeply. He moved from home to home, welcomed by families who saw him as a man in need, and provided him with food and shelter. For nearly 50 years, Jerome lived among the people of Nova Scotia. Families cared for him, and strangers tried to unlock his secrets without luck. And in 1912, he took his secrets to the grave, with his real identity still unknown to this day. On Friday, June 12, 2009, a man carrying a black shoulder bag and standard carry-on luggage boarded a bus bound for Sligo, Ireland. Arriving that afternoon, he took a taxi to the Sligo City Hotel, where he paid for his stay in cash and checked in under the name Peter Bergman. His details seemed inconspicuous at first: thin, with short gray hair, blue eyes, and a tan complexion. He appeared to be in his late 50s or early 60s. According to hotel staff, he spoke with a thick German accent and was well-groomed and neatly dressed. Though he looked like the typical traveler, his behavior quickly became anything but ordinary. The man was a frequent smoker, often spotted outside the hotel with a cigarette in hand. But it was the strange purple plastic bag he carried with him all over town that caught the attention of surveillance cameras. Each time he left the hotel, the bag was full of items or personal effects. Yet when he returned, the bag was mysteriously absent. Authorities later concluded that he must have disposed of its contents, taking care to do so in blind spots of the public surveillance cameras, making it impossible to know what he threw away. The following day, Saturday, June 13th, the man visited the Sligo post office where he purchased 8 82-cent stamps and airmail stickers. On June 14th, 2009, the man left the hotel between 11 and 11:30 a.m., asking a taxi driver for recommendations on a quiet beach where he could swim. The driver suggested Ross's Point, a quiet coastal spot just a short ride away. The man was dropped off at the beach, where he spent some time alone before being picked up and being dropped off at the Sligo bus station by the same taxi. On Monday, June 15, 2009, the man checked out of the Sligo City Hotel, handing over his room key. This time, he carried a black shoulder bag, a purple plastic bag, and a different black luggage bag, unlike the one he had arrived with. He walked through the streets of Sligo until again arriving at the bus station, still carrying all 3 bags. At around 1:30 that afternoon, he ordered a cappuccino and a toasted ham and cheese sandwich at the bus station. As he ate, he examined pieces of paper from his pocket, reading them carefully before tearing them in half and discarding them in a nearby rubbish bin. By approximately 2:30, he boarded a bus for Ross's Point, the same coastal town he had visited just days earlier. 16 people reported seeing him on the beach, where he casually greeted each passerby. He was described by those as relaxed and unbothered. The following morning, Tuesday, June 16th, the story of Peter Bergman took a dark turn. At 6:45 a.m., a father and son were training for a triathlon on the beach when they stumbled upon the man's lifeless body. The man was dressed in purple-striped Speedo-type swimming trunks, his underpants pulled over them, and a navy t-shirt tucked into the trunks. The father and son immediately contacted the police, and by 8 a.m., local doctor Valerie McGowan pronounced the man dead. The post-mortem report revealed disturbing details about the man. His wallet, money, and any form of identification were missing. Despite the man having been washed up on the beach, the Sligo medical examiner found no evidence of drowning. Additionally, there were no signs of foul play, ruling out the possibility of homicide. The examination of the man's teeth revealed a life of frequent dental work. And though his outward appearance suggested good grooming and care, the man's internal health painted a much darker picture. He was suffering from advanced prostate cancer and bone tumors. His heart also showed signs of heart disease. Despite these severe health conditions, the toxicology report indicated that he had no medication in his system, no prescription drugs, no over-the-counter pain relievers. Given his condition, the medical examiner noted that he would have been in significant pain and would require medication to live comfortably, yet there was no trace of anything in his system. Further investigation into the name he had provided at the hotel, Peter Bergman, revealed even more questions. The address he gave for his home in Austria was a fake. No street name existed with the name he provided, either in Austria or Germany. It was evident that the man had gone to great lengths to conceal his identity. After an extensive 5-month investigation, the man's identity remained unknown. He was buried in Sligo, with a modest funeral attended by only 4 Irish police officers. As of March 2025, the man remains unidentified. Despite public appeals in Austrian and German newspapers, no relatives, friends, or witnesses have come forward. The mystery of Peter Bergman continues to haunt both the town of Sligo and anyone who comes across his story, leaving behind a trail of questions that may never be answered. The man known as the Dolly Gray imposter remains one of football's greatest unsolved mysteries. Claiming to be Jack Dolly Gray, an end from Princeton University, he stepped onto the field with a fabricated past. Rumors swirled that he had been an All-American honoree in 1922, but the only player to earn that title at Princeton was Howdy Gray, another end. Despite this, the imposter successfully played in the National Football League during the 1923 season, suiting up for both the St. Louis All-Stars and the Green Bay Packers, his deception going completely unnoticed. In 1923, the imposter confidently approached Ollie Cray, the owner and player-coach of the NFL's St. Louis All-Stars, selling himself as Dolly Gray, a celebrated All-American from Princeton. Impressed by his credentials, Cray signed him without hesitation. The imposter took the field for 3 games, but something was off. His performance fell far short of what one would expect from a star athlete. Suspicion grew, and when the truth was finally uncovered, everyone realized that they had been deceived. The man he had signed was no All-American, but an imposter whose real identity remains unknown to this day. Realizing he had been conned, Ollie Cray decided to turn the tables. After a tough 6-0 loss to the Cleveland Indians, Cray, desperate for cash to keep his struggling team afloat, saw an opportunity. He passed the imposter off to Curly Lambeau and the Green Bay Packers, selling him as the best player on the All-Stars roster. From Lambeau's perspective, it seemed like a solid deal. But 2 weeks later, when the Packers faced the All-Stars at Sportsman's Park, something didn't add up. The game ended in a narrow 3-0 victory for Green Bay, yet Lambeau had seen enough. After the game, he confronted Cray, demanding to know the truth about Dolly Gray. Lambeau's suspicions were confirmed. The player had only appeared in one game for the Packers and performed miserably. Then, just before their next match in St. Louis, he mysteriously vanished, boarding a train and disappearing without a trace. Cornered, Cray finally admitted the truth. The entire deal had been a joke, a last-ditch effort to offload the imposter and keep his team financially afloat. He assured Lambeau he had always planned to return the money, but by then, the damage was done. The imposter had come and gone, leaving behind nothing but questions. To this day, his true identity remains one of professional football's greatest mysteries. For thousands of years, something strange was laying in the ancient tombs and resting places of China's long-forgotten elites. Perfectly round and impossibly smooth discs, carved from jade, one of history's greatest artifacts. Jade, which is known as the stone of the heavens, was believed to hold mystical properties: purity, immortality, and a connection between mortals and the divine. Owning one was a symbol of respect, aligning oneself with the celestial order, and the ability to wield influence over both earth and sky. What makes them so incredible is that jade is one of the hardest known materials, and the discs could not be carved with simple metal tools. Instead, each disc was painstakingly shaped over months, maybe even years, through relentless grinding with sand and water. The earliest discs were plain and simply designed. But as the centuries passed, master artisans began engraving intricate designs onto the jade discs. Only the wealthiest, the most revered, could possess such a labor-intensive treasure. The origins of the discs stretch back over 5,000 years, when the Liangzhu culture first shaped them. These discs have survived through multiple dynasties: the Shang, the Zhou, and the Han, each civilization refining the craftsmanship of the discs. During the Zhou dynasty, which was from 1046 to 256 BC, the discs took on another role, one of defeat. In times of war, when an army fell, its leader would not simply surrender. He would present his jade disc to the victor as a silent offering. It was an acknowledgement that his power, once blessed by the heavens, was no more. In 1790 AD, the Qianlong Emperor, a ruler obsessed with antiquities, came into possession of an ancient jade disc. Yet even with all the scholars and historians at his disposal, he could not decipher its purpose. So he made an assumption. Believing the disc to be a bowl stand, he paired it with a fine ceramic dish. But the emperor seemed to know, at least deep down, that it wasn't supposed to be used that way. The emperor inscribed his uncertainty onto the jade itself, questioning the object's history in a poetic verse. It is said there were no bowls in antiquity, but if so, then where did this stand come from? This stand is made of ancient jade, but the jade bowl that once went with it is long gone. Ironically, that very same disc that Qianlong had mistaken for a bowl stand would later be placed in his own tomb, sealing him in death as it had countless rulers before him. So what were the discs really used for? Thousands of years after their creation, their true purpose remains unexplained. In 1903, beneath the ruins of the legendary Palace of Knossos, on the Greek island of Crete, archaeologists uncovered two mysterious figurines. These artifacts would become symbols of one of history's most mysterious civilizations. Within what archaeologist Arthur Evans called the temple repositories of the palace, a cache of ritual objects were found, including the Minoan snake goddess figurines. Dating back to roughly 1600 BC, the Minoan snake goddess figurines were crafted from faience, a spectacular glass-like material that gave them an almost otherworldly sparkle. Clutched in their hands, winding serpents coil and twist, symbols that have been linked to fertility, protection, and forces of the underworld. Their wide, hypnotic eyes and elaborate garments suggest figures of great significance, like priestesses and deities. But despite their supposed significance, their true meaning still remains unknown. Arthur Evans was captivated by their beauty and saw them as representations of a powerful mother goddess. Evans identified the larger figurine as a snake goddess, and the smaller one as a snake priestess. The larger figurine represents a vision of ancient mysticism, with snakes winding gracefully over her arms and a tall cylindrical crown, maybe even crowned by a serpent's head. At the time of excavation, she was incomplete, missing an arm and her lower body. But even in this condition, her sacred knot at the waist was shimmering, a symbol of religious power. The smaller figurine is much more mysterious. With two snakes held high in raised hands, she's wearing a headpiece adorned with either a cat or a panther. Originally discovered without her head and one arm, Evans later reconstructed her face, while the separate feline element was attached afterward. Despite the unresolved questions about their true nature, whether they are deities, priestesses, or something else entirely, the Minoan snake goddess figurines remain one of the world's most mysterious artifacts. The Nuragic bronze statuettes are unique sculptures from the Late Bronze Age and early Iron Age, created by the ancient Nuragic civilization of Sardinia. Archaeologists have discovered over 500 of these statuettes across the island, often in sacred locations such as holy wells and Megara temples, as well as in villages and within the island's stone towers. Intriguingly, some have also been found in Etruscan tombs in central Italy, dating to the 8th and 9th centuries. This suggests that there was a cultural exchange or connection between the Nuragic people and the Etruscans. Crafted using a mold, the statuettes can range in height up to 39 centimeters, about 15 inches, and showcase exceptional craftsmanship. The subjects of these figurines are diverse, including scenes of daily life among the Nuragic people, figures from various social classes, such as warriors, chiefs, and commoners, and deities and religious symbols. There are also figurines showcasing animal representations, ships, and other seemingly mundane everyday objects. The precise dating of the Nuragic bronze statuettes remains a subject of debate. While traditional estimates place their creation between the 6th and 9th centuries, more recent findings in other parts of Sardinia date to the 13th century, prompting a re-evaluation of this timeline. These statuettes continue to be one of Sardinia's most intriguing archaeological treasures, offering valuable insights into the spiritual, social, and artistic practices of the Nuragic civilization. The story of the Rongorongo tablets begins in 1864 on the remote island of Rapa Nui, otherwise known as Easter Island. A French missionary, known as Eugène Hérault, first discovered these mysterious wooden planks, covered in strange symbols and intricate carvings, in the homes of the Rapa Nui people. When he asked the people of Easter Island what the symbols meant, he was told they were just simple ornaments from the past, with no significant meaning. But something about them was different. These weren't just decorative markings. They followed patterns and sequences. They were obvious signs of writing. And, if true, Rongorongo could be one of the very few independent writing systems ever developed, a rare and astonishing achievement from one of the most isolated places on Earth. Unfortunately, by the time scholars took interest in the tablets in 1868, it was already too late. Wars, disease, and the Peruvian slave raids of the 19th century had shattered Rapa Nui society, and with them, the knowledge of how to read these strange symbols had disappeared. The glyphs themselves are carved in reverse boustrophedon, with each line alternating in direction, forcing the reader to turn the tablet as they progress, a technique found in few other ancient scripts. The symbols depict humans, animals, celestial objects, and abstract symbols, each one a potential clue to unlocking a lost language. But deciphering the Rongorongo tablets has proven nearly impossible. There is no Rosetta Stone, and there is no guide for researchers to translate the glyphs. There are no living descendants who can interpret their meanings. Some believe Rongorongo contains records of rituals, genealogies, or historical events, a window into the beliefs and traditions of Rapa Nui. Others suggest it might encode star charts or agricultural cycles, essential for survival in an environment of dwindling resources. There are even those who propose a connection between Rongorongo and distant South American cultures, hinting at an ancient trans-Pacific link. Despite decades of effort, no one has fully cracked its code. But maybe the key is still out there, hidden away, waiting for the right moment to finally reveal the lost voice of the Rapa Nui. In the summer of 1957, on the coast of Maine, an amateur archaeologist named Guy Melgren made an incredible discovery, a discovery that would challenge everything we thought we knew about early exploration in North America. Among thousands of ancient artifacts, he uncovered a single small silver coin, one that didn't seem to belong. The site where the coin was found, known as the Goddard Site, near Penobscot Bay in Brookline, Maine, was once a Native American settlement. Dated to around 1180 to 1235 AD, it was an active trading hub, where goods from distant lands were exchanged. At first, experts believed it was an ordinary British penny from the 12th century. But as scholars examined it more closely, they realized it was something far more extraordinary. The coin was Norwegian, dating back to the reign of King Olaf Kyrre, who ruled from 1067 to 1093 AD, a time when the Norse were sailing the North Atlantic, reaching as far as Greenland and Newfoundland. If this was evidence that Viking explorers had made it as far south as Maine, the implications would be staggering. If the coin was authentic, it suggested one of two possibilities. The Norse may have traveled beyond Newfoundland, reaching the coast of Maine centuries before Columbus. Or the coin may have been traded from Norse settlers in Greenland or Newfoundland, passed from one indigenous group to another until it ended up in Maine. But the one problem was that no other Norse artifacts were found at the site. If Vikings had been here, where was the evidence of their settlements, their tools, their weapons? The Maine State Museum, which holds the coin today, believes it is genuine, a rare and valuable artifact. Yet skeptics argue that the circumstances of its discovery raise questions. Similar Norwegian coins were available to collectors in the 1950s, leading some to suspect a hoax. The debate over the Maine penny remains unresolved. Some see it as proof of early Norse presence in North America. Others believe it's just a coin that somehow ended up in the wrong place, at the wrong time. Most of us start each day knowing for certain that a few things about ourselves hold true. That you are in control of your thoughts, your senses, your body. But what if that certainty began to crack? What if you swore you weren't moving your hand as it was actively choking you? What if you constantly bumped into walls because your brain insisted they weren't there? What if your memories collapsed into fiction, or someone else's face slid across your partner's? There are corners of the human brain where reality frays, where logic folds in on itself, where self-awareness unplugs from the body it belongs to. This isn't fiction. These are rare, haunting, and documented syndromes with verified case studies and hospital records. Each one reveals something deeply human and deeply fragile about how we construct our version of reality. In this episode, we explore some of the most mysterious and unexplainable syndromes ever observed. They're not just curiosities. They're windows into what happens when the machinery of consciousness misfires. They show us that you, the narrator in your head, the person you think you are, isn't a given. It's an illusion built on balance, wiring, chemistry, and sometimes that balance breaks. These are stories of identity unraveling, our senses lying, and our brains and bodies turning inward, against ourselves. Welcome back to Fireside Unsolved, episode 162. 6 most mysterious and unexplainable syndromes ever diagnosed. In the deadliest moments, alone, broken, close to death, some people swear they weren't actually by themselves. They say someone else was there, unseen but undeniable. A calm voice, a steady presence, a guide. This strange phenomenon is known as third man syndrome. One of the earliest and most famous accounts comes from polar explorer Sir Ernest Shackleton. After his Antarctic expedition was trapped in ice for over 2 years, he and 2 men set out on a desperate trek across the glaciers of South Georgia to find help. In his 1919 book South, Shackleton wrote, "During that long and racking march of 36 hours, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. He never explained it further, but he didn't need to. The term third man comes from T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, inspired by Shackleton's own story. Who is the third who walks always beside you? When I count, there are only you and I together. But when I look ahead up the white road, there is always another one walking beside you." Over the years, others have come forward. Climbers, sailors, shipwreck survivors, polar explorers, sharing stories of the same thing. A presence that appears when these adventurers were on the edge of death, offering strength and guidance in their darkest hour. Even modern adventurers like Reinhold Messner, Peter Hillary, and Anne Bancroft have spoken of the third man. Is it a trick of the mind, or maybe a coping mechanism when the brain is pushed to the edge? Some scientists point to something called bicameral mentality, a mental state where the brain may split awareness into two selves. Others see it as a psychological survival tool, a way to project resilience when none is left. The questions about these strange experiences are still unanswered, but what's not in question is that the third man has pulled people back from the brink. That, in and of itself, is mysterious enough. For many people, looking at art stirs raw emotion, but for a rare few, it strikes something deeper, a place inside so powerful the body literally can't handle it. Stendhal syndrome is a strange, psychosomatic reaction to overwhelming beauty, especially in the form of art. It strikes suddenly, with a racing heart, dizziness, confusion, and sometimes hallucinations, and fainting. All triggered not by danger or fear, but by the raw aesthetic experience from a piece of artwork that they saw. The condition is named after the 19th century French writer Stendhal, who collapsed under the weight of beauty in 1817 after visiting the Basilica of Santa Croce in Florence, where Michelangelo, Machiavelli, and Galileo are buried. He described his experience like this: "I was in a sort of ecstasy. I reached the point where one encounters celestial sensations. Everything spoke so vividly to my soul. I had palpitations of the heart. Life was drained from me." The term Stendhal syndrome was officially coined in 1979 by Italian psychiatrist Graziella Magarini, who documented over 100 cases among visitors to Florence. Doctors at Florence's Santa Maria Nuova Hospital have actually gotten used to tourists showing up with symptoms after viewing Botticelli's The Birth of Venus, Michelangelo's David, or wandering the Uffizi Gallery. Still, the condition isn't formally recognized in psychiatric manuals. Admittedly, it's not common, but it is real. There's also a twist, something called scientific Stendhal syndrome. This version of the syndrome doesn't come from art, but rather it comes from ideas. People who encounter massive, mind-bending scientific concepts, like the scale of the universe or the paradoxes of time, can experience the same kind of awe-inducing overload. Researchers describe it as a reaction to epistemological shock, when the mind is confronted with something so vast or profound that we just cannot understand. A 2017 study at MIT found that 18% of people visiting a planetarium experienced extreme emotion when watching simulations of the Big Bang or black holes. Unlike moral elevation or inspiration, this isn't about feeling uplifted. It's about being crushed, in a strangely euphoric way, by beauty, by truth, or by the sheer size of the unknown. Imagine being bitten by a stray dog, then days later feeling something moving inside your stomach. You hear growling coming from inside your own body. Then you convince yourself that you're pregnant with puppies. This isn't the plot of a horror film. It's puppy pregnancy syndrome, a real psychosomatic condition reported across rural parts of India. As unbelievable as it sounds, tens of thousands of people have claimed it's happened to them. Sufferers believe that a dog bite can result in literal conception. They think the puppies grow inside their abdomen, and that death is inevitable unless the puppies are expelled. And this doesn't only happen to women bit by the strays. The same thing happens for men as well. In these strange cases, people turn to witch doctors, who offer bizarre oral cures. These healers also warn that medical treatment will block their rituals and cures, creating a dangerous choice for the patient. Puppy pregnancy syndrome is considered a culture-bound syndrome, a mental disorder shaped by the context and traditions of a particular region. It's especially prevalent in areas with limited education and access to healthcare, such as Assam, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, and West Bengal, India. While it's easy to dismiss puppy pregnancy syndrome as absurd, it's a tragic example of what happens when deep-rooted fear, low health literacy, and cultural belief systems collide. It usually begins quietly. A wife returns home to find her husband watching TV on the couch. He has the same hair, the same voice, same face he's had their entire relationship. But everything inside her tells her something is off. That's not him. It looks like him, sure, but it isn't. She's 100% certain. This is Capgras syndrome, a strange and deeply unsettling delusion where a person believes someone close to them has been replaced by an identical imposter. Not a stranger in disguise, not a hallucination, an exact copy. First described in 1923 by French psychiatrist Joseph Capgras, the condition often appears in people with schizophrenia, dementia, or brain injury. Sometimes it's linked to neurodegenerative disease, sometimes to trauma. One woman locked her bedroom door at night, convinced the man in the house wasn't her husband. Another believed his wife was a stranger that was making duplicates of herself, some that were good and some evil. A man diagnosed with dementia swore 6 different women were rotating in and out of his home, each pretending to be his wife. To the person with Capgras syndrome, this isn't a feeling. It's fact. No amount of reasoning, pleading, or proof can crack the delusion. It's not that they can't see their loved one. It's that they believe what they see is a mask. Scientists have traced the problem to a kind of neural disconnect. Face recognition in the temporal lobe still works, but the emotional response generated by the amygdala doesn't light up. It's as if the brain recognizes a face, but not the familiarity. That mismatch breeds suspicion. What's usually felt as warmth becomes eerie distance. And it doesn't stop with people. Some patients think their homes have been duplicated, or that time has skipped, warped, or reset. One man looked at old photographs and believed they were new each time. His memories unanchored, his sense of continuity fractured. There's no single cause, no clear cure. Treatment focuses on managing the underlying disorder, schizophrenia, dementia, or other neurological conditions, often with antipsychotics or therapy. But even then, recovery is unpredictable. Capgras syndrome is more than a psychiatric anomaly. It's a glimpse into how tightly identity is tied to emotion, how deeply we rely on recognition, trust, and memory to anchor the people we love. Take those away, and what's left? A stranger, wearing a familiar face. A man, having had a recent stroke, needed emergency surgery. After the procedure, he was wheeled into a bright room with big windows. Nurses asked how he felt. He smiled and said, "The sun looks beautiful today." Except it wasn't sunny. And he couldn't see the windows. In fact, he couldn't see anything because he was blind. This is Anton syndrome, also called visual anosognosia, a rare, baffling condition where someone is completely blind, but denies it. Not out of fear, not out of pride. They genuinely believe they can see. They walk into walls, knock over chairs, reach for things that aren't there. Then when asked why they tripped or stumbled, they'll say the floor was uneven, the lights were dim, the shadows tricked them. And they're not lying technically. Instead, their mind is filling in the blanks, so to speak. The eyes still move, pupils react to light. But the damage runs deeper, back in the brain, where vision is actually made. The occipital lobes, the brain's visual processors, have gone dark. But the parts responsible for speech, belief, and storytelling are still active, still trying to make sense of the world. So when reality goes missing, the mind invents a version of it. That's called confabulation. The result is chilling. A person who is completely blind describing the color of your shirt, but with the confidence of a person that can see perfectly. Only about 24 cases have ever been published. Most start after a stroke, sometimes head trauma. No one's sure why the denial is so absolute. One theory says the visual system breaks, but the brain's speech centers don't get the memo. Another suggests a disconnect between visual memory, metacognition, and reality checking. So the mind falls back on old memories and assumptions, stitching together a fake version of the world. There is no cure. Recovery depends on the cause, stroke, trauma, or neurodegeneration, and how much damage has been done. But even with rehab, the denial often lingers. They can't see, but they see no reason not to believe they can. One morning, a woman woke up, got out of bed, and slapped herself in the face. Not metaphorically, literally. Then her left hand curled into a fist and punched her cheek. She thought it was a twitch, maybe, but when she tried to eat, her hand batted the fork away. This is alien hand syndrome, a real neurological condition where one hand acts on its own, seemingly with a mind separate from the person it belongs to. The person is aware, but they have no control. They'll watch their own hand like it belongs to someone else, and often they feel like it does. There's a reason for that. Alien hand syndrome usually shows up after trauma to the brain's corpus callosum, the thick bridge of nerves that connects the left and right hemispheres. The brain is split, and communication falters. The left hand, controlled by the right hemisphere, begins to operate solo, without the oversight of language, logic, or conscious intent, which usually live on the left side. So the hand becomes a rogue agent. Treatment is limited. Sometimes occupational therapy can help retrain the brain's coordination. Patients learn to give the rogue hand something to hold, an object to grip or manipulate. Some tie it down at night. Others talk to it, try to reason with it. Not because they're delusional, because somehow it helps. Alien hand syndrome is rare, less than 100 published cases, but it's unforgettable to those who have suffered from it. Some stories seem too bizarre to be real, too eerie, too poetic, too downright impossible. But these 5 events didn't come from horror movies or folklore. They happened. Documented, witnessed, and unexplained. A small Kentucky town was showered in raw meat from a clear sky. A mysterious intruder crept into homes at night, not to steal, but to cut people's hair. A dead outlaw toured the country as a sideshow exhibit for decades before anyone realized he was real. An oily black substance crawled across Caracas, claiming lives and defying science. And a swarm of bees appeared, uninvited, uncalled, outside the home of a woman who had cared for them in life. These aren't just strange events. They're reminders that truth isn't always logical, that the world is full of loose ends, frayed edges, and unsolved endings. Welcome to 5 stories that shouldn't be real, but are, on Fireside Unsolved. Around midday on March 3rd, 1876, in Olympia Springs, Kentucky, Mrs. Mary Crouch was outside on her porch making soap when something strange began to fall from the sky. It wasn't rain, it wasn't hail, or even snow. It was chunks of soft, red, wet pieces of raw meat, falling from the sky. In a matter of minutes, the Crouch family farm was covered in it. The meat rained down over a patch of land roughly 100 by 50 yards wide. There were no storm clouds overhead. There was no warning of the strange event. 1 minute there was just sky, and then there was meat. Some pieces were small, no bigger than a quarter. Others were the size of a hand. Locals that were either incredibly brave or incredibly dumb tasted the sky meat and said it resembled lamb or venison. At least one piece was sent to scientists for further investigation. Under a microscope, the meat appeared to be lung tissue. Other pieces resembled muscle and cartilage, but no one could determine exactly what kind of animal it came from. Rumors spread around the small Kentucky town. Some said it was a sign from God. Others feared it was a plague, a warning. One scientist suggested it was nostoc, a kind of jelly-like bacteria that simply swells when wet. But there had been no rain. And this didn't look like jelly. This looked like meat. The most plausible theory, if plausible even applies here, came from Dr. L.D. Castenbein. Vultures, when startled or threatened, will regurgitate their meals to lighten their load and escape danger faster. It's possible the flock had just fed, they were scared of something, and their undigested meal was what rained down on the Crouch property that day. No one saw the birds, no one heard them, but nothing else made more sense. And it never happened again. The Kentucky meat shower remains one of the most bizarre, unexplained events in American history. It's not a hoax, not a legend. It definitely happened. The records are there, the samples were tested, and still, 150 years later, we're left with a simple, haunting fact. One day, in the middle of Kentucky, it rained meat. It was the summer of 1942 in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and the small town was already caught up in the fear and anxiety of World War II. But then, an unknown individual began breaking into homes under the cover of darkness, not to rob, not to murder. He was breaking in to cut hair. The first victims were 2 young girls at the Our Lady of Victory's convent in Pascagoula. Mary Evelyn Briggs and Edna Marie Heidel were woken up in the middle of the night to a terrifying sight, a man escaping through their bedroom window. Each of the girls discovered strands of their hair had been cut off. However, they were otherwise unharmed, at least physically. Mary Evelyn Briggs later recounted a description of the man, a short, stocky man in a white sweatshirt and had a shiny instrument in one of his hands, possibly scissors. The town's anxiety deepened as more cases emerged. One morning, a 6-year-old girl found her hair had been cut while she was sleeping. Another woman woke up to find a large portion of her hair had been sliced off. In another instance, a dirty footprint was even left on the bed. The local press named him the Phantom Barber, and Pascagoula, Mississippi began to panic. Families started nailing their windows shut. Some parents slept with guns by the bed. Then the Phantom Barber's activities escalated in an alarming way. Mr. and Mrs. Terrell Heidelberg were violently assaulted in their home, both sustaining injuries from an iron pipe. This brutal attack deviated from the Phantom's previous nonviolent intrusions, leading some to question if it was even the work of the same individual. In a significant development, authorities arrested 57-year-old William A. Dolan, a German-educated chemist. Dolan was charged with attempted murder related to the Heidelberg assault. During a search of his property, police reported finding human hair, though its connection to the Phantom Barber incidents remained inconclusive. Dolan consistently asserted his innocence, but was eventually convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison for the assault of the Heidelbergs. But notably, he was never formally charged with the haircutting incidents. To this day, many believe he was innocent, just a scapegoat in a town that was desperate for answers. But if it wasn't William Dolan, then no one knows who the Phantom Barber was, and we may never know. He botched the robbery. He died in a shootout. Then the real story began. Elmer McCurdy was not a particularly good outlaw. Born in 1880 in Maine, he drifted west after losing his job as a plumber and developing a drinking problem. He joined the Army, learned to handle nitroglycerin, and after his discharge decided to use that training for crime. But his plans were usually a mess. In one train robbery, he used too much explosive and blew the safe to pieces, along with most of the money inside. Another time, he hit the wrong train and made off with just a few dollars and a bottle of whiskey. Days later, in October 1911, cornered by a posse in a barn in Oklahoma, McCurdy died in a gunfight. That should have been the end of the story, but it was only the beginning. After his death, and when no one came to claim his body, the undertaker at a local funeral home embalmed him with arsenic, dressed him up, and propped him in the corner. McCurdy's mummified corpse became a local attraction. They began charging people a nickel to see the bandit who wouldn't give up. Years passed before a traveling carnival claimed the body, saying they were his long-lost relatives. From there, he was passed from promoter to promoter, used as a prop in sideshows, wax museums, even a haunted house. For decades, no one realized the figure they were gawking at was a real human being. In 1976, while filming an episode of The $6 Million Man at an amusement park in Long Beach, California, a crew member tried to move what they thought was a mannequin. The arm snapped off, and inside were human bones. An investigation followed, and dental records confirmed it. The body was Elmer McCurdy. 66 years after he died, he was finally buried, in a real grave, under concrete, so he could never be dug up and displayed again. It looks like something from a science fiction film, an oily black ooze creeping across city streets, growing with the heat, swallowing pavement and gripping tires. But this wasn't fiction. It's real. And for years, it's terrorized the highways of Caracas. La Mancha Negra, or the Black Stain, first appeared in 1986. It started as a smear, just 50 yards long. Road workers spotted it while repairing a stretch of asphalt between the Venezuelan capital and its airport. No one thought much of it, until it began to spread. The black goo was like something alive, with a mind of its own. On hot, humid days, it expanded. On dry days, it shrank. Thick as bubblegum and slick as ice, it turned roads into death traps. Cars spun out. Trucks slid into ditches. By the early 1990s, over 1,800 deaths were reportedly linked to it. The government tried everything. High-pressure water, detergents, resurfacing roads. Nothing worked. They even dumped tons of limestone over it to dry it out. But that backfired, and residents complained the dust made the air unbreathable. The blob just kept coming back. Theories ran wild, with some saying it was sewage leaking under the roads. Others blamed cheap asphalt, even sabotage. The most accepted explanation is a nasty mix of engine oil, brake fluid, dust, and urban grime, sprayed from thousands of aging cars coughing their guts onto the roads, then cooked by the Venezuelan heat into some kind of monstrous goo. But even that explanation was only a guess, and despite millions spent and experts flown in from around the world, no one knows exactly what it is, where it comes from, or how to get rid of it. Margaret Bell had always loved bees. For 26 years, she kept them in the small English village of Lintwardine, just outside Ludlow in Shropshire. She tended to them with care, spoke softly when she passed their hives, and treated them less like insects, more like friends and neighbors. Margaret continued her friendship with the bees until the day she passed away, in June of 1994. Her funeral was quiet, family, close friends, and locals who knew her by name. But the most extraordinary visitors came later, and they didn't walk. They flew. Just after the funeral, hundreds of bees appeared. Not at the cemetery, not at the church, but outside the house where Margaret had lived for decades. They gathered in a quiet swarm, clustering in a tight formation on the brick wall across the street. A still, loud, buzzing mass of bees. And they stayed there for nearly an hour, right across the street from Margaret's home. Then, without warning, they lifted into the air and vanished over the rooftops. No one could explain it. Her hives were over 7 miles away. The bees had never swarmed there before. Some said it was coincidence. Others called it instinct, a strange magnetic draw. But to those who had known Margaret, it felt like something more. In beekeeping, there's an old tradition called telling the bees, where keepers inform their hives of deaths, marriages, or births, out of respect and superstition. Failing to do so was believed to bring bad luck. Whether anyone told the bees that Margaret had died, no one knows. But maybe they didn't need to be told. They came on their own, and they said goodbye to their old friend. It was a quiet summer afternoon in 2023 when Gina Weiss, 31, and her friend Toby, 38, wandered into something strange. Hiking near Blankenberg, deep in the forested Harz Mountains of central Germany, the two friends stopped at the edge of the sand caves, and that's when they saw him. Up high on a ledge, barefoot and holding a long wooden spear, was a man, or at least what looked like one. He looked like he was caked in dirt, or maybe even just covered in thick matted hair. It was hard to tell. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared at the women. Locals call him the Wolf Man, and for over 5 years there have been scattered reports of a wild man living off the grid in the Harz Mountains, stealthy, solitary, and always disappearing back into the forest before anyone can get too close. But on that day, Gina and Toby were close enough to take a photo. In the image, the man is crouched in the sand and doing something with his hands. It's not clear what. Their encounter lasted an uncomfortably tense 10 minutes. 10 minutes in the presence of a man who seemed less like a person and more like a visitor from another time. This wasn't the first time the so-called Wolf Man had scared the local hikers. Over the years, others in the Blankenberg region have reported sightings of a man that looks like he's covered in animal fur, almost like a full wolf costume. In March 2023, the mystery escalated when several hikers called police, claiming a man dressed like a wolf was running through the woods. Authorities launched a search in the area where he was last seen, but like every time before, they found nothing. No man, no tracks, no signs of a campsite, just trees and silence. It's worth noting, forests cover nearly a third of Germany. They're ancient, thick, and steeped in folklore. For centuries, people have whispered about hermits, forest spirits, and wild men living beyond the edge of civilization. These are the same woods and the same landscapes where stories of wolves and witches first took root. But maybe the nickname of Wolfman is a little bit of a stretch. Maybe. Maybe the man in the woods is out there living his best life. It's possible he's just someone who chose to leave the civilized world behind, looking for something better. But as far as most people are concerned, he's a grown man, hiding in the same forest that once gave birth to fairy tales. No one knows who he is, where he came from, or why he lives like this. But the photo is real, and so is the mystery. It was Australia Day in 1986. On the banks of the Darling River in Australia, near the quiet border town of Wentworth, a group of fishermen pulled something unexpected from the water. The lifeless body of 44-year-old Ali Reza Sanmez, a disabled father of 4 from Mildura, Australia. He had been shot above each eye, once in the back of the head and again through the body. It wasn't a random killing. It was an execution. Ali was last seen 2 days earlier, on January 23, 1986, around 5 p.m., when he left his home and was spotted walking down 9th Street. An hour and a half later, another witness saw him in Merbane, 12 miles away, arguing with a man and 2 women outside a local post office. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. 3 days later, police found his car. It was floating downstream, abandoned in a New South Wales river. But it was what they found inside that still fuels the mystery. In the glove box, there was a single photograph. It showed an unknown man, Middle Eastern or Mediterranean in appearance, maybe in his late 30s or early 40s. Dark curly hair, a heavy mustache. He's never been identified, and no one knows how his photo ended up in Ali's car. But investigators believe the man may have known Ali, or more importantly, knows what happened to him. Police released the image, along with police sketches of the man and two women seen during that final argument. But no one came forward. No names, no leads, just a photo in a glove box, a body in the river, and a mystery that's never been solved. The chief inspector at the time of the murder issued a public appeal. We still do not have a clear motive for Mr. Sanmez's murder and need assistance from the community to bring his killers to justice. We do believe the man and two women seen with Mr. Sanmez at Murbain could have information that may very well help us solve this case. We are re-releasing images of those three people in the hope that someone might recognize them. And we also have an artist's impression of a vehicle they were believed to have been traveling in. That vehicle was a green Holden HQ with a white roof. Any information, no matter how insignificant it may seem, could help us find the people responsible for Mr. Sanmez's death. Investigators have repeatedly emphasized there's no evidence that Ali Sanmez was involved in any criminal activity. His murder doesn't appear to be linked to any other case. And yet, almost 40 years later, no arrests, no solid leads, just a photograph, a few sketches, and a family still without answers. If you have any information, you're urged to contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-333-0000 or submit a tip online. David Parker Ray lived in a quiet town and kept a monstrous secret. From the outside, his home in Elephant Butte, New Mexico, looked ordinary. But behind it sat a trailer, a soundproofed semi he called the Toy Box, filled with devices meant for torture. Ray, known today as the Toy Box Killer, is believed to have kidnapped and tortured dozens of women over the course of decades. Authorities think there could be as many as 60 victims. His method was methodical: kidnap, imprison, torture, release. Sometimes he didn't work alone. His daughter and girlfriend were among his reported accomplices. But for all the confessions, accusations, and even hard evidence, one thing has always been missing: the bodies. No one has ever been definitively linked to a murder by Ray. No human remains have been found. In 2011, over a decade after Ray's arrest and consequent death in prison, the FBI released hundreds of photographs from the case, personal items collected from his property, jewelry, clothing, items that may once have belonged to his victims. Frank Fisher of the Albuquerque FBI office issued a plea to the public. We are asking family and friends of missing people to look over these photographs and contact us if they recognize any of these items. Each item is a question, a life potentially lost, still waiting to be found. And somewhere in that sea of photographs, maybe, just maybe, is a clue, a connection. Because the real horror wasn't just what he did, but how much he may have gotten away with. When the Khmer Rouge seized power in Cambodia in 1975, the country was emptied overnight. Cities were evacuated, hospitals cleared, homes abandoned. Everyone, young, old, sick, disabled, was driven into the countryside. No one was spared. Resistance meant death. In the years that followed, under the leadership of Pol Pot, Cambodia became a graveyard. Up to 3 million people were killed in the name of revolution. Doctors, teachers, engineers, anyone with an education was targeted. Wearing glasses was enough to get you executed. So was speaking a foreign language, or praying, or crying, or being born into the wrong ethnicity. At the heart of the nightmare was Tuol Sleng, also known as S-21. Once a school, it was turned into a secret prison where the Khmer Rouge interrogated, tortured, and executed thousands. Every prisoner who passed through its gates was meticulously documented. Mugshots were taken, confessions, often forced under extreme torture, were recorded, and then the bodies disappeared. Some were sent to the killing fields just outside Phnom Penh. Most never left the compound. Roughly 20,000 people were imprisoned in S-21, though the true number is likely higher. As I said before, each prisoner was meticulously documented and photographed at S-21. Rows upon rows of black and white portraits taken by prison staff, men, women, children, captured in the seconds after their arrest. Eyes wide with confusion, fear, or silent defiance. These faces, frozen in time, have become the only trace many victims ever left behind. A haunting archive of lives erased. On December 25, 1978, Vietnam invaded Cambodia. As the Khmer Rouge regime collapsed, officials ordered all remaining inmates at S-21 to be executed before the Vietnamese arrived. When soldiers finally entered the prison, They found only a few survivors, and a building full of blood-stained rooms, rusted shackles, and silence. For years, the files and identities of S-21's prisoners were thought to be lost forever. But in the mid-1990s, two American photographers, Christopher Riley and Doug Niven, unearthed a vital piece of history. In a forgotten cabinet at the prison, they found nearly 7,000 negatives, mildewed, dust-covered, but intact. Working with Cornell University, they cleaned, cataloged, and printed them. Every prisoner had a photo. But when S-21 was shut down during the fall of the Khmer Rouge, the negatives were separated from the accompanying files, and names were lost. Today, most of the faces in the recovered images remain unidentified. They are no longer just photographs. They are portraits of a genocide, and for many, they are the only record of that person ever having existed. On April 1st, 2014, two Dutch students, Chris Kremers and Lisanne Froon, set off for a hike near the small mountain town of Boquete, Panama. They packed light but prepared. They planned a short walk through the cloud forest near the base of the Baru volcano. They never returned. 10 weeks later, a local woman turned in a backpack she said she found near a riverbank deep in the jungle. Inside was a water-damaged phone, 2 pairs of sunglasses, cash, 2 bras, and a camera. The camera would become the most mysterious part of the case. It contained over 90 photographs. The first few pictures are innocent. Smiling selfies, mountain views, a trail cutting through trees. Then, nothing for 7 days. Until April 8th. Suddenly, dozens of images appear, taken in the dead of night. Flashlit shots of jungle, rock, darkness, a plastic bag, a candy wrapper, a mirror, the back of someone's head, a crude stick formation that some believe marked a location. The photos go on with no clear pattern or explanation, just confusion, desperation, and isolation captured frame by frame. Some say the girls were lost and trying to survive. Others point to darker possibilities: foul play, human trafficking, cover-ups. Some of the photos seem almost staged. Others feel frantic. But no image gives a clear answer. Only fragments of what happened in those final days. The remains of Chris and Lisanne were later found. A few bones, a boot with a foot still inside. Forensics couldn't determine exactly how they died. There were no signs of violence. But the camera tells a story no one can fully understand. 90 photos, 2 missing girls, and a jungle that still refuses to give up the truth. In every corner of the world, there are ancient objects that have baffled historians, archaeologists, and scientists for centuries. Whether through their inexplicable origins, unusual materials, or their purpose, these objects continue to challenge our understanding of history. In this episode, we'll uncover some of the most mysterious and awe-inspiring ancient objects ever discovered. Join us as we dive into the mystery behind these ancient wonders, exploring the stories and theories that surround them. Get ready for a journey through history's most mysterious objects on Fireside Unsolved, episode 165. 5 mysterious ancient objects. In a quiet patch of German woodland, just off a nondescript road between the towns of Lübeck and Mönchengladbach, stands a pillar that shouldn't exist. It's not marked, no signs lead to it. Most people pass by without ever knowing it's there. But buried half in the ground, worn down and weathered from centuries of exposure, stands a mysterious artifact known only as Eiserner Mann, or the Iron Man. It's a solid column of iron, driven into the earth with no known origin. Standing roughly 1.2 meters tall, or about 4 feet, the object appears almost industrial, like a leftover piece of modern machinery. But records of it date back to at least the 17th century, and some believe it could be much older. There are no seams, no visible tool marks, no record of it ever being forged, transported, or installed. Just a heavy iron monolith in the middle of a forest. What makes Eiserner Mann even stranger is the material. Unlike typical iron exposed to the elements for hundreds of years, it hasn't corroded into oblivion. Made of pig iron, there is very little rust to be found on it at all. Some researchers suspect it could be a medieval boundary marker. Others think it might be an anchor from some long-lost structure. But none of those theories quite explain how it was manufactured, or how it ended up here, completely isolated, with no ruins, no foundry, and no other ironwork nearby. The pillar is marked with a sign that reads, "The Iron Man is a piece of a poured pig iron ingot. It is approximately 2.18 meters long, and about 1 meter of its T-shaped end is in the ground." This was apparently intended as an attachment point for transport and processing, and has until now, as an anchoring point, prevented any attempt at removing the ingot by force. Its porous surface and the uneven cross-section over its whole length are caused by the sandbed pouring technique. The technique and the form point to a date of manufacture in the late Middle Ages. Origin and original purpose of the Iron Man have not been explained satisfactorily. It has always been surrounded by numerous tales and legends, as well as pertinent and also obscure speculation. It was first mentioned in a document in 1625 as part of the borderline between Alfter and Heimersheim along the Roman aqueduct. According to a later source, it still fulfilled this function in 1717. Its former position cannot be located accurately anymore. It was not until 1727, under Prince Elector Clemens, that the Iron Man was placed in its present position. It served as a marker of the main planning line while expanding the system of paths for hunting between Augustsburg Palace in Brühl and Herzogsfreude Palace in Röttgen. Today, it is a popular meeting point among hikers. The technology required to forge such a piece, on that scale, should have left a larger trail behind. But it didn't, at least not in the immediate area. And so the Iron Man stands, silent, weathered, and unmoved. A forgotten monument to something we still don't understand. In the heart of Delhi, within the Qutba complex, there is a monument that doesn't call much attention to itself at first glance. It isn't covered in gold, it doesn't tower over the complex like a skyscraper. It's just a tall, slender column of iron, quiet, simple, unassuming. But for metallurgists, historians, and mystery seekers, it's an incredible relic of the past. The Iron Pillar of Delhi stands over 7 meters tall, or approximately 24 feet, and weighs more than 6 tons. It was forged more than 1,600 years ago, possibly during the reign of Chandragupta II, and it's been standing outdoors ever since. But here's the catch. It hasn't rusted, at all. In a city where air pollution corrodes modern steel in a matter of decades, this ancient iron column has resisted decay for over a millennium. The pillar carries inscriptions in Sanskrit, praising the achievements of a long-dead king. But the real achievement might be in the metal itself. Modern analysis shows the iron is nearly pure, unusually so, and includes traces of phosphorus that may have contributed to the protective layer it formed over time. Still, even with what we know about its composition, the scale and precision of its forging raise more questions than they answer. There is still little known about how ancient Indian metalworkers created the pillar without modern furnaces or machinery. It's a mystery how such a gigantic piece of iron was made so long ago, that's so massive and so resistant to the elements. No blueprint was ever found, no written record of the process, just the pillar. Some claim it's proof of lost knowledge. Others think it's a fluke of materials and the climate it's in. But whatever the truth is, the Iron Pillar still stands as a monument to an ancient composition of metals that is still not fully understood. It was called woven air. For centuries, Dhaka muslin was the most prized fabric in the world, a fabric so light it seemed to float. It came from Bengal, specifically from the region now known as Dhaka, Bangladesh. However, sometime in the 19th century, it disappeared, and no one has been able to recreate it since. Dhaka muslin wasn't just fabric. It was legend. Royals from Europe to the Mughal Empire draped themselves in it. Ancient Greek writers spoke of it. Napoleon's Josephine adored it. But what made it truly extraordinary was its impossible delicacy. A single piece could take months to weave, and it was made from a cotton so rare it only grew along a specific stretch of the Meghna River, under very specific climate conditions. It wasn't mass-produced. It was grown, spun, and woven by artisans who inherited the craft over generations. The cotton, known locally as Fudi Karpas, has since vanished, wiped out by colonial agricultural policies, changing trade routes, and the systematic destruction of Bengal's textile industry under British rule. When researchers thought about bringing it back in the 21st century, they couldn't, because the cotton no longer existed, anywhere on Earth. The weaving technique had been lost. No one alive had touched the fabric with their own hands. Instead, they were only able to look at ghostly fragments in museums and faded portraits. And so Dhaka muslin remains one of history's softest mysteries, a lost material woven into memory. In 1936, deep in the ancient necropolis of Saqqara, Egyptologist Walter Bryan Emery uncovered the tomb of a young noble named Sabu, son of Pharaoh Anajib, who ruled during Egypt's first dynasty over 5,000 years ago. Among the expected funerary items, ceramics, stone vessels, copper tools, was something else, something no one could quite explain. It was a disc. Shaped from a single piece of schist, a fragile, brittle stone, the object measured just over half a meter across. At first glance, it looked like a bowl, but it had 3 sharply curved lobes, almost like the blades of a fan or propeller, extending from a central hub. It didn't resemble anything else from ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. No inscriptions, no symbols. Just an uncanny symmetry and a design that seemed somehow out of place. Archaeologists cataloged it, studied it, and theories multiplied. Some said it was a ceremonial incense holder. Others proposed it was a stand for vessels, or a symbolic object with no practical purpose. But none of these explanations fit cleanly. Today, the disc is housed in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, labeled simply as a stone vessel. But it remains one of the most debated artifacts from ancient Egypt. A 5,000-year-old riddle, carved in stone and shaped like nothing else from its time. In 1878, near the coast of Aotea Harbor on New Zealand's North Island, a storm toppled a manuka tree. Beneath its tangled roots, something was buried, something that shouldn't have been there. It was a bird, carved from dark green serpentine, sleek and smooth. The figure was unmistakably avian, long-beaked, elegant, almost creepy in its precision. The people who found it had never seen anything like it. No one had. They called it Korotangi, the crying bird. But to the local people, the Tainui Maori, it was no accident. Oral tradition spoke of a bird brought from Hawaii, the spiritual homeland, aboard the great Tainui Waka, a sacred companion, a carved treasure that mourned when separated from its people. The carving, they said, was not just symbolic. It was real. A taonga lost to time, now returned. But Korotangi's mystery didn't stop there. Experts examining the artifact were puzzled. The smooth precision of the carving suggested the use of metal tools that the Maori, prior to European contact, simply didn't possess. And the style didn't match anything else from Polynesian culture. No known oceanic carving bore its shape or form. It looked foreign. Some speculated it might have come from Southeast Asia. Others hinted at even more distant origins. But no definitive link was ever found. After its discovery, Korotangi passed through several hands, from private collectors to the Dominion Museum in Wellington. And then, over a century later, in 1995, it was returned. Not to a museum, but to the people who had long claimed it as their own. Today, it rests at Turangawaiwai Marae, home of the Maori king, a sacred space, and a living center of the Kangitanga movement. It is not just a relic. It is a presence, a question, a symbol. Korotangi is still a bird out of time, and perhaps it's still crying. Not from sorrow, but from the weight of a story that still holds mysteries. Long before satellites, compasses, or GPS, humans looked to stone, stars, and symbols to understand the world. They carved, inked, and etched their visions of land, power, and myth into whatever material they had: papyrus, clay, rock. Some were accurate, and others were filled with monsters, gods, or invented lands. But all were reflections of how ancient civilizations saw themselves, and the mysteries that lay beyond the horizon. Some of these maps tell us more than they should. Some suggest knowledge that shouldn't have existed, and some raise questions we still can't answer. This is part 2 of our series of 5 of the most mysterious ancient maps ever discovered, on Fireside Unsolved. In 1995, on the Danish island of Bornholm, something unexpected emerged from the earth. At first, it was just a single carved stone, no bigger than a hand, then another, and another. Before they knew it, archaeologists at the Vasagord site had uncovered over 300 small stones etched with mysterious patterns. Most of them were round, carved with radiating lines, like tiny suns captured in stone. The Danes call them solsten, or sunstones. They date back to the late Stone Age. between 2900 and 2700 BC. That's over 5,000 years ago, when Europe was still deep in its Neolithic period, and when this island was home to farming communities just beginning to shape the land. But these weren't everyday tools. These stones were deliberate, symbolic, and possibly sacred. The Vasagord complex where the stones were found wasn't just a settlement. Archaeologists believe it was a ceremonial enclosure, built by a culture deeply connected to the rhythms of the sun. The entire site is aligned with astonishing precision. Its entrances line up with the rising and setting sun during the summer and winter solstices. This was likely a holy place, possibly the heart of a Neolithic sun-worshipping religion, a solar cult. Among the classic sunbursts, a few stones stand out. Some are square, carved with crosshatched lines that resemble fields. Others are covered in intricate cobweb patterns. A few shapes look like stalks of wheat or barley, crops we know were grown on Bornholm at the time. Researchers now think these may have been more than ritual items. They might have been maps. Not maps in the modern sense, with borders and names, but symbolic maps. Stones representing farmland, land divisions, fields owned or farmed by clans or families. Some archaeologists believe they marked territory, who worked what, who had the right to harvest certain crops, which piece of land belonged to which group. But here's the strangest part. Many of the stones were deliberately broken before being buried. This wasn't random destruction, it was ritual, a sacred act. The leading theory is that the sunstones and mapstones were offerings. The breaking was intentional, part of a ceremony, an appeal to the sun gods to bless the land with fertility, and maybe something more, a kind of contract, a spiritual way to legitimize a community's claim to farmland, witnessed by the sun, sealed by sacred ritual. Each stone was a promise to care for the land that the gods gave them, a legacy carved into rock, shattered with purpose, and buried in the earth, waiting 5,000 years to be found again. Just over 2.5 meters long, the Turin papyrus map is fragile, faded, and torn. But the map is a treasure, not of gold or jewels, but of knowledge. Drawn over 3,000 years ago, it's considered the oldest surviving topographic map in the world. Its story begins in ancient Egypt, around 1150 BC, during the reign of Ramses IV. The scribe who created it was no ordinary draftsman. His name was Amenekta, son of Ipui, a scribe of the tomb from the village of Deir el-Medina, a community of artisans who built and decorated the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. He wasn't just drawing lines on papyrus, he was planning a royal mission, and what he produced wasn't just a map, it was a masterpiece. The map was commissioned for a quarrying expedition deep into the eastern desert, to Wadi Hammamat, a rugged 15-kilometer stretch of barren hills and dry riverbeds. The objective was to extract blocks of Beckenstone, a prized form of Metagraywaki sandstone, destined to become towering statues of the king himself. The papyrus shows the winding path of the wadi, the junctions with neighboring valleys like Atala and El Cid, the quarry site, and even a distant gold mine at Birum Fawakir. He marked out settlements, noted distances between critical points, and described the terrain. This was no abstract schematic. It was a carefully observed, data-rich visualization of the land. And what makes it even more extraordinary is that it's also the world's first known geological map. Different colors and symbols were used to depict different rock types, black and pink hills for varying geologies, and dotted patterns in brown, green, and white to represent the diverse gravel found in the wadis. He even labeled areas with the size and quality of the stone blocks to be quarried. This wasn't just artistry, it was strategy, a tool for logistics, planning, and resource management. And by some definitions, it qualifies as the earliest known geographic information system, a way to visualize and analyze the geography, geology, and economy of a region, all on one piece of papyrus. Today, the map resides in the Museo Egizio in Turin, Italy. How it got there is its own story, likely taken from Egypt by Bernardino Drovetti, a controversial figure in the early days of European antiquities collecting, sometime before 1824. But what remains clear is this. Long before satellites, a scribe in ancient Egypt mapped the desert with an eye as sharp as any modern cartographer. And in doing so, he left behind one of the oldest, and most advanced, scientific documents from the ancient world. Over 2,500 years ago, a Babylonian scribe took a slab of clay and pressed into it what may be the oldest surviving map of the world. At just 12 centimeters tall, this small clay tablet, now known as the Babylonian Map of the World, or Imago Mundi, attempts something extraordinary: to capture all of existence in one circular design. At the center is Babylon, the heart of the world, bisected by the Euphrates River. Around it, the map names nearby cities and regions: Susa, Urartu, Assyria, each carved in cuneiform script. The known world ends at the Bitter River, a circular ocean encircling the land like a cosmic moat. But beyond that ocean is the mystery. The map features 8 triangular zones at the outer rim, called Nagu in Akkadian. These were not real territories. They were imagined lands, symbolic or mythical in nature. One is described as a place where the sun is not seen. Another speaks of a land where a winged bird cannot safely reach it. These inscriptions hint at places both unreachable and unknowable, echoes of distant fears or legends. But the real mystery is what the map was truly meant to be. Maybe it was political, placing Babylon, the empire's capital, at the literal and cosmic center of the universe. Or maybe it's religious, a reflection of divine order. Or was it something even more ambitious, an attempt to explain the world, both seen and unseen in a single diagram? And there's more. The reverse side of the tablet includes text that doesn't directly match the map's layout, suggesting that the tablet might combine sources from multiple documents. In 1995, a second fragment was discovered, showing part of a previously unknown ninth Nagu, raising questions about how complete this grand vision really was. Today, the clay tablet rests in the British Museum. It's cracked, worn, and still incomplete, but it remains one of the earliest attempts by human hands to draw the world, and to hint at what might lie beyond its edges. In 1558, a Venetian nobleman named Niccolo Zeno the Younger published a map and a series of letters he claimed to have discovered in his family's archives. These documents purportedly detailed a voyage undertaken by his ancestors, Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, in the late 14th century. According to the narrative, the Zeno brothers explored the North Atlantic, visiting regions such as Iceland, Greenland, and even reaching parts of North America. The map accompanying these letters depicted familiar territories like Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and Greenland. However, it also introduced several unknown lands, most notably an island called Friesland, situated south of Iceland. Friesland, along with other mysterious places like Estadaland and Drogeo, captured the imagination of many and appeared on various maps for centuries, despite lacking any basis in reality. Modern scholars have cast significant doubt on the authenticity of the Zeno map and the accompanying letters. Many historians consider them to be fabrications by Zeno the Younger, possibly intended to bolster Venetian claims of early exploration in the New World, predating Columbus. The inclusion of fictitious islands and the lack of corroborating evidence from other contemporary sources support this view. Yet the Zeno map's influence was profound. It shaped European perceptions of the North Atlantic for generations, illustrating how cartography can reflect not just geographical knowledge, but also the aspirations and myths of its creators. In 1900, in Brittany, France, a French archaeologist named Paul du Châtelier unearthed a curious slab of engraved stone from a prehistoric burial. He noted its markings, lines, shapes, and patterns, but no one knew what they meant. So the slab was stored in the cellar of a chateau and forgotten for over a century. Then, in 2014, researchers rediscovered it. What they found wasn't just a decorated rock, it was a revelation. The Saint-Belec slab, carved around 1875 BC during the early Bronze Age, is now believed to be the oldest known map in Europe, and perhaps the oldest known map of a specific territory anywhere in the world. Carved into a sheet of schist nearly 2 meters long, the slab's surface is etched with geometric symbols: lines, circles, rectangles, and hollows. For decades, their meaning was a mystery. But after a detailed 3D survey and analysis by a team of French and British researchers between 2017 and 2021, the engravings were matched with the geography of the Odette Valley in western Brittany. The map shows river networks, hill contours, fields, burial mounds. It even appears to represent political boundaries, a Bronze Age principality carved into stone by people long vanished. But the mystery doesn't end there. At some point, the slab was deliberately broken. Its top section was lost. The rest was buried face down inside a stone tomb, used as part of its wall. Researchers believe this may have been a symbolic act, an iconoclastic rejection of the power structure the map once represented. A kingdom erased not just in life, but in stone. For over 100 years, this artifact sat in the dark, its purpose unknown, its message unread. Only now are we beginning to understand what it meant to the people who made it. It's not just a map, but a statement, a claim, a record of control over land, water, and memory. The St. Belec slab reminds us that maps aren't just about geography. They're about power, identity, and how a civilization sees itself in the world.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Fireside Unsolved. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to help the channel grow. Until next time, take it easy and be easy, you filthy bastards.